Let's see here. All right, everyone. I am joined today by Robin Swan of Swan Apothecary. And as we get into this conversation today, Robin, would you like to take a second and just introduce yourselves to the listeners of Bite Me, a little bit about who you are and what you do with Swan Apothecary?
Sure. Well, let me see. What I mostly do is cause trouble and break the law. So those are the things that are most dear to me. I've been formulating cannabinoid medicines for literally my entire life. And I had a company called Firebird Touch Therapy. I'm a structural integration neuromuscular therapist and a North American herbalist. And so I kind of rolled all of that experience and knowledge into my cannabis line. So that's kind of what I do. We work with people who are living with life-threatening illness as well as debilitating pain. And then we also work with the psilocybin family as well, because it's an amazing element to work with people who have traumatic brain injury or compounded PTSD.
Yeah, that sounds like you have a ton of experience in this industry. Have you found it challenging to be in the cannabis industry after moving from where you were previously?
It is a cesspool. That is the kindest way to say it. Honestly, there's a lot of challenges within this industry, which anybody who's in it, doesn't like explaining it is pointless, but there's a lot of challenges. So yes, the simple answer is absolutely very.
Yeah. Yeah, hence the causing trouble, which I'd love to hear anyway, because cannabis obviously comes from a tradition of challenging authority. So now you describe yourself as a plant alchemist with roots in indigenous herbalism. For someone who's learned about cannabis medicine from a very different tradition than what we have, as far as modern infusion techniques go, what did that foundation teach you that the industry still hasn't caught up to yet?
We are basically plants, us human beings. So both of my grandmothers, my maternal and my paternal, were both indigenous women, one to North America and one to the country of Iran. And they were both born in the 1800s, and they both used cannabis as medicine. My North American grandmother harvested wild hemp, and my Persian grandmother grew the most insane indica ever on the planet from those super Afghani kush seeds. So coming to the cannabis industry, one of the things that I find really challenging is that people flip out of secular jobs like, I used to be an accountant and now I'm in the cannabis industry. And I feel like there is a real loss of understanding for what exactly the medicine of this plant is. This is, yes, it is a plant, but it is a teacher plant, and it sits in the center of the plant wheel. So it makes it a catalyst for other plants. So when it's combined correctly, it's able to synergize the energy of the other plants and then basically give it a superpower and make it much more available for us as human beings. Also, cannabis regulates herself. I just have to say that, one of the things that I see in this industry, if you are out your integrity, if you are not doing good business or good medicine, you will get shut down. Because this plant is alive, and she has been with us for always and since always on every single continent, on all continents, and all indigenous cultures have used cannabis. And if you are out of alignment with her, she'll take your ass out, period.
Right. Like karma is a bitch. I love that. Now, as far as like the tradition that you grew up around, I think that's really cool. And you're suggesting that the indigenous tradition is that cannabis is at the center and it works synergistically with a whole bunch of other plant compounds. And do you see it as sort of missing from what we have today and sort of like the legal side of things?
So, okay. Legality has nothing to do with this. And that is a colonial construct that is put on top of the plant system of medicine. So that's the only way I can answer that, because there's no regulatory body of how cannabis should be used, grown, or distributed. That is just colonialism and capitalism.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't disagree with you there. That's for sure. Now, as far as you and your work with Swan Apothecary, you make small batch ancient extraction techniques based on the lineage that you were just talking about, the experience, the knowledge that you have. What does small batch mean for you in the final product that large scale production just can't?
So we're not making more than 200 items at a time, max, somewhere between 50 and 200 items. So like if I'm making a tincture, we're only going to make 200 max. So the difference
Right.
between industrial is that they're moving through hundreds of pounds of product per minute, and they're kicking, like, let's just talk about the gummies since this is called Bite Me. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of the edibles that are within the dispensary are not infused; they're injected or they're sprayed. So if you've ever wondered why, when you've gone and gotten some gummies or an edible from a dispensary and one hits you like a train and the other one you're like, I didn't feel anything, it's because they're not infusing that cannabis product into the actual mixing of the product. They're either coming by with an injector and they're putting distillate into each piece of candy, or they're using a spray gun and they're spraying over it. So that way, one candy could have 500 milligrams and one can have 10. That what we do is we make food. So we incorporate the concentrates through fat to make sure it breaks up correctly in the system. And then every gummy is basically weighed out so that the client knows that that's 20 milligrams that they're eating. And then they're individually wrapped.
Right. Okay. And that makes obviously a big difference because you have that ability to pay attention to the quality control, which you can't do when you're just spraying
Well, they
edibles,
don't
I
care
guess.
as soon as you get to corporate farming, it doesn't matter if we're talking about cannabis or corn. Okay. As soon as we
Mm-hmm.
get to corporate farming, we lose a level of connection to what we are doing
Right.
and what
Yeah.
we're
Full
eating.
stop. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just across the board on everything. It's not just to the cannabis industry. It's how we treat our whole industrial complex of farming.
Mm-hmm. So you're keeping things intentionally small so you can pay attention to what's going into each and every edible so that when somebody buys one from you, they know if it says 20 milligrams, it's
It's
going to be
20
20
milligrams.
milligrams.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also, we're also dealing with, like, I know from seed to sale, every single person who's touched my product. And that includes the isolates that we use. Like, we know who the farmers are of the hemp over in the East Coast side of the United States and where it's getting processed. There isn't anything that's coming through my doors, whether it's terpenes or cannabis or isolates or mushrooms, that I don't personally know the cultivation of that product and how it was handled. So that
Right.
is very different. So when you're doing something like, a big company that's in every single dispensary and doing whatever, they're using entire crops and they don't even care. They're picking stuff up off the floor. I mean, they're just running all the garbage and everything. So, in California, we've had an issue with pesticides. And that's why our licensure is so strong. And that's why our labs are probably the most stringent in the entire United States. California has the standard of excellence as far as heavy metals and pesticides and other nasty stuff that could get into your flour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that totally makes sense to me because I knew somebody that used to work at a cannabis, I'm not sure what you would call it, but they're processing dried flower. And he would sometimes comment on the quality of said dried flower that was coming into this plant for them to process. And it was like, not great. That's all I could say. But they're
Because it's
processing
about
it.
profitability. It's about profit,
Yeah.
right? So we
Yes.
are not a not-for-profit company.
Mm-hmm.
However, because this is not my first rodeo. I've taken many products to market, from a flourless chocolate cake to a sex toy. So I've already been in the secular world before I came to cannabis. And so for me, my first initial clients were my actual already existing practitioner clients. It was very important to me that the standard of excellence was met because I knew these people one by one. And it just took until it's only about 2, maybe 3 years that I don't know every single person that's buying our product.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I like that. The standard of excellence, I think, is something that when people find it, that's where they want to go to buy their things, whether it's in the
Right.
cannabis space or elsewhere, because it's just values aligned, I guess. And that's how I like to go about buying things when I do have to buy things. Now, we touched a little bit on the ancient extraction techniques. Can you talk a little bit more about what those look like versus what I might be doing in my own home kitchen?
Anytime you extract cannabis, it's an ancient technique,
Okay.
period, full stop, straight up.
Okay.
Okay. Until you get to
Yeah.
CO2, which is the absolute worst way to extract cannabis. And it robs it completely of all medical value. All right.
Right.
So let's talk about RSO, because everybody knows that buzzword, Rick Simpson oil, who
Hmm.
actually hates that everybody uses his name. And the product is actually called FECO, fully extracted cannabis oil. And that has been with us since the beginning of the Ming Dynasty in the Ayurvedic text. You can mark it back all the way to the 600 BC to see how they were using medicine. So anytime you are taking alcohol or butter or any type of fat and you are extracting cannabis, that's an ancient technique. That's exactly how our ancestors did it. Now, what we've learned over time in science is that BHO, when we can extract things through butane, we're able to do it because it's cryonically frozen. We're able to pull the entire profile of all of the terpenes and all of the molecules that way. You can't do that with alcohol because there's a heating element that has to be involved. So when it's pulled through butane, you're getting all of that decarboxylation and welcoming of everybody through cryonically freezing it, which doesn't destroy the molecule. Heat destroys the molecule. Like, there are all these people who are making medicine and this always just makes me nuts. So I just have to speak it to everybody who hears it, who puts their weed in the oven and then
Right.
decarboxylates it. Like, what are you doing? You are basically killing the entire bottom panel of that plant. And then they start extracting it. That was not done in the Ming Dynasty. That is not in the Ayurvedic text. So that is not an ancient extraction method. That is some dude in tube socks and shorts to his knees who wants to pull some weed through some butane, who's trying to tell you something that's not correct. So stop
Okay.
burning your weed, people. Stop doing that. You are shorting yourself out. And the whole conversation of it has to be really high THC or else it's not going to be healing. That's a huge myth and not true as well. There's only 2 THC molecules. I get really fired up about this. I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay.
There's only 2, so it doesn't take that much to you only need 1 sperm to make an egg have life, right? You only need a teeny tiny little bit of THC to activate that molecular chain of all of those C molecules, which do all the heavy lifting and all of the repair. THC has one real purpose, and that's to eat cancer cells. That's its big magic. It doesn't necessarily reduce pain. Like, I have, because in this position where I'm working with people with like broken bones and muscles and, head injuries, I have learned over my 30 years of practice that there's nothing worse than being high and still in pain.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then your brain's probably really more focused on it than
Yeah,
it would have been before. Yeah.
exactly. So if there's a whole bunch of like CBD, CBG, CBN, CBDA, all of these other molecules that are very heavy in the mix and a teeny tiny little bit of THC, a lot of pain relief can happen. And also THC is amazing topically for pain relief.
Oh, I love it. I use it every single day for pain relief. But it makes sense to me as well that, using cannabis for pain relief, it's not a panacea for all types of pain. I would imagine you've probably seen a lot more than I have, but would that make sense to you?
Well, yeah, because where is the pain coming from? Is it nerve pain? Is it muscle pain? What's the origins? I talk
Yeah.
to hundreds of people all the time, and I want to know where it started. Like when I'm working with somebody who's living with cancer and, like they're in a late stage of it and it's mets to their bones and their liver. That's terrible. But me addressing that isn't as important or directed as like, did it start at breast cancer? Did it start at breast cancer? Was it like in the pelvis? Like, where is its origins? There's only 11 systems in the body and 5 of them are really what run us. So understanding the illness or the disease that's attached to that system helps us understand how to use cannabinoids correctly. Like, we have a line of high dose and low dose infusions, and those were all created through my 30 years of experience of working with people suffering with different illnesses, and also like tapping into the world community. My dear friend Corey Yellen, God bless her little pointed head up there in heaven. Her and I and our network of doctors and other cannabis makers throughout the entire globe, since 2009, have been able to kind of come together with our own understanding of what really works and what doesn't work. So it's a lot of self-driven knowledge. And that's like when people reach out to me and they're like, well, is it going to cure my cancer? I'm like, well, I really can't say that because that's between you, God, and the disease. What I can say is that it's going to extend whatever life you have left. It's going to reduce your pain exponentially, and you're going to feel a lot better. And then hopefully you look at the caveat and the cherry on the cake, and it will delete all your cancer. But you are a carbon-based being, and once your root system is fried, you're fried.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. But I do have to circle back for a second there, because you were talking, and I'm trying to think if I missed something that you said, but when you were talking about decarboxylation, you're saying don't do it in the oven. Can you talk more about that?
Don't decarboxylate your weed. That is so stupid. Stop it, people.
Because that goes against like almost everything you hear about.
It goes against every loser in tube socks and long shorts and a freaking like logo on the back of your shirt that's telling you what to do. Okay. So let's, again, you asked me about ancestral and ancient wisdom. Let's go back to the Ayurvedic text and back to the Ming Dynasty. Nowhere in that text does it say burn your weed before you extract it. Nowhere in any of that medicine. It is completely contraindicated to burn off part of the plant to raise just the THC to make medicine. You've just missed the entire underbelly of the plant. You've burned off most of the terpenes. You've burned off like all CBN, all the other lower molecules that need a lot less heat.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense. And I will die on this hill, and I will go to town with science with anybody who wants to say that I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm just very curious about this, because obviously I'm one of those people that have always said you should decarb your weed before you infuse it, because that's sort of the conventional wisdom, and that's what I've always done myself.
Well, I'd like to invite you not to do that, and then I want you to know. Now, here's how you can test my theory, because don't believe anything I say, right? Do both. Decarboxylate, make your stuff. Don't decarboxylate, make the same stuff. Take both things to the lab and look at the difference.
Right.
And then circle back with which one is going to be the more healing and provide your body with the biggest bang for its buck. Now, if you just want THC, burn the fuck out of the plant. Go ahead, do it, ruin it, kill it. If you just want to get high, kill the plant. Go ahead. But if you're literally looking for medicine, stop it.
Okay, so you're saying in the context of someone who just wants to use cannabis recreationally, they might decarb so they get those higher THC potencies. But if you're using it for
not necessarily going to get them either. You're not. So let me just be very clear. Decarbing your weed is stupid, period. Like straight up, like come for me in the comments. I don't care. I will win with science on this. Stop doing it. It's bad information. Like RSO. All right. That's somebody's name. The plant is called fully extracted cannabis oil. Rick does not get $1 when you use his name. You can go to YouTube and see the 12 videos that he's made about stop calling this product my name. He's a Canadian too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, he is. Okay. Well, that's super interesting. I am going to have to try some experiments just myself, just to see, but you're also suggesting.
Please circle back to me and let me know what you found.
Yeah. And if I don't decarb, you're suggesting I'm going to maintain more of the, well, I guess that makes sense.
You're going to get the same level of THC, more than likely. It might be, it's going to be within the 10-point range. Okay. But what you're going to see is the entire underbelly of the plant is going to be there. You're going to have a higher terpene rate. Terpenes are super important for healing. They're incredibly important. They feed our olfactory.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, my next question was talking about how home edibles cooks who always start with butter and oil can up level their homemade infusions. And I guess one thing they can do is just skip the decarb and see what happens.
Don't decarb. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I find that really interesting, because I've interviewed over 70 people on this show now over time, and you're the first person to have ever said anything like this.
And am I also the first person with a degree in herbology and medicine? Like, I'm just curious about that as well, because like I come to this business with education in plants, not just cannabis. I didn't just all of a sudden, I want to make some cannabis stuff. In fact, it was the last thing I wanted to do was start a cannabis industry, our business. I mean, I had a full-blown practice working with professional sports, and now I'm like bobbing and weaving around the law and trying to help people. And I don't make anywhere near the money I made when I worked with the NFL. And I have 3,000 times more the risk. So why would I keep doing it unless there was something greater than money that was serving me? And that is that I actually see people get well. And that is priceless, because we work a lot with people who have children. And when you can save an infant, you know, a 9-month-old baby with brain cancer, and at the very minimal, keep that baby alive for 2 or 3 years, that's a success story. That matters in this world. You know, it makes a difference for those people who gave birth to that child.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Um, so you work with, your patients with Swan Apothecary. You have oral and transdermal applications. So if somebody's infusing at home and they want to, do you feel like carrier fat matters as
I
far as
think,
like,
yeah, I think that if you're infusing at home, I don't waste your money on like the machines, the magic butters, and the all that kind of stuff. Like, go old school. It's super easy, low heat, long time. And
Mhm.
when you're extracting, you need to know the temperature of the butter or the fat that you're extracting with. Nothing extracts at the same temperature. Coconut is very low in temperature. You can easily burn your coconut oil. You're not going to get the same kind of product if you do it correctly. So spend a couple minutes with your buddy ChatGPT or Google and find out the boiling point of the butter or fat that you're using to extract it in. And then, work from there. You're going to get a much richer, sweeter, better balanced product.
Right. And but you don't find necessarily you have a preference to one carrier oil versus another? Because I
Well,
used to
I'm a
infuse
big fan of olive oil, honestly. Like
olive oil.
olive
Yeah.
oil, hemp seed oil, those are my favorites, right? But
Mhm.
people love a coconut oil. I'm not a big fan of coconut oil just because of its low, like it just goes bad quick. It's such a low heat point. It heats and starts melting at 70 something, degrees. I don't know in Celsius what that is. I apologize.
No, that's
Um,
okay.
and so you're going to have more turning, things like getting
Right.
worse, faster and stuff. If you're going to use butter, I'm a bigger fan of ghee because you've burnt off that fat. That's going to, and then, if you're a home extractor, the most important thing that you can do, whether you're using alcohol or fats, it doesn't matter, is to make sure that you've removed all of your plant material because that's what molds your product. So you have
Yes.
to filter, 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 filter ad nauseum. Filter, let it sit, look at the bottom. If that bottom isn't as clear as the top, warm it back up, filter again. The longer you filter or the more you filter, the more plant material you move, the longer your stuff is going to last for.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me because I have infused butter not like a long time ago. I remember infusing butter and finding that it had gone bad on me, it had gone rancid. And which is uncommon. Butter typically is pretty, shelf stable, but I had infused it and there was probably still some plant material in it and it went bad on me and it was really gross.
And
And I'm
it's
glad you mentioned, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the olive oil as well because when I first started making edibles, I loved coconut oil, but I don't infuse that as much anymore either, not only because of the lower smoke point, but just it adds a certain flavor profile that I find it makes it less versatile as far as an infusion goes.
right. So if you like coconut oil, use cocoa butter. It's got a higher burn rate. It
Right.
sits up longer. It's heavier fat and it tastes better.
Yeah, and ghee is fantastic as well because it's really fatty, and we all know that
Yeah.
cannabinoids
And it
love
doesn't
fat.
really have too much of a flavor. Yeah. So.
Yeah, yeah. Now a lot of the Bite Me listeners come to edibles from a wellness angle, so they're not just here to, eat edibles and get high. A lot of them, like myself, they want sleep, they want to be able to sleep, they want pain relief, anxiety management. How do you approach formulating for specific outcomes like that?
Well, anxiety is definitely a low THC situation because too much THC will make you want to climb the walls. And if you're having a bad
That's
reaction
me.
to any kind of THC, it means you're probably allergic to it. You could have
Mm,
an allergy towards it. So, and I don't know how available, like on this, like, can you go into a dispensary and buy isolates? I don't know. Like, can you? Do you do that? Like for CBD and
um,
other CBG, things like that? I'm not exactly sure how you get those. Like, we buy them by kilos. So I don't know
yeah,
how you buy them in small ounces, but cannabis plays well with so many things, and I think it's great. Like people who want to use it for low dose, low dose, low. That's the simplest way is like low dose, pain, sleep, low dose. It can prime your system. If you're making products and you want to use them for sleep, then use the product 2 or 3 hours before you're ready to go to bed, and then take some more right before your butt hits that bed. This way,
right.
you've got some moving through your system, and then as you're sleeping, more is dropping into your blood system.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. And also, as far as like going to the dispensary, you can buy distillate. I think I worked at a dispensary a few years ago, and I remember when they had CBD distillate or not distillate isolate come out,
Mhm.
and you could buy that, but it was pretty expensive from what I remember,
Yeah, I think
and
it's
you were
come
buying
down
it by
in
the
price.
gram.
I think it's probably come down in price quite a bit, you
Yeah,
know.
it probably has. And there might be more options available as well than there used to be when I worked there, because that was a few years ago by now. But minimum effective dose, it sounds like kind of what you're recommending, which I do
Yeah,
like. Like,
start
yeah,
small, go high.
yeah,
Like nobody wants to be like balls to the wall high. And like, this is why when we're working with people who are living with cancer, we're wanting them to use somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 milligrams of cannabinoids a day. That's a lot. And 4% of that mix is going to be THC. So,
right,
and you're going to sweat like a junkie if you do it orally. So we've created a suppository system where
right.
by going through, when you use cannabis, and a high dose cannabis as a suppository, it passes first through the lymph system, which is great if you're living with cancer because you want your lymph system healthy. And then it comes back, it does a pass through the colon wall into the blood system, which takes about 6 to 8 hours. So you can function, you can drive, you could do your kids, you could have your life, and you could still get that amazing amount of cannabinoids in your body before, without having to sit in the corner drooling.
Yeah, because most people don't really have the time to do that. And like you mentioned earlier, I am one of those people where I can easily, if I consume too much THC, get paranoid. And it's very uncomfortable, obviously. So that's why the minimum effective dose is, even when I'm like enjoying cannabis recreationally, I still try and enjoy that minimum effective dose, because just going a little bit too far has me
No
questioning
fun.
my life choices and being like, what's that sound? Like, it's not,
Right,
it's not
right
fun.
to the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes from fun to fearful very quickly,
Yeah,
and then, I'm just like, "When is this over?" Which kinda defeats the purpose of the whole thing anyway, but
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And if you ever get in that situation, anybody who's like got way too much THC in their system and they're losing their mind, there's a couple things that are really helpful. First of all, a hot shower, that's going to move it through your system. Second, peppercorns, chew on
Yes.
peppercorns,
Yeah.
and fat, have some ice cream or some fried chicken. And then if none of that is working for you and you're just like, I can't take it, take a Benadryl and go to sleep.
That's interesting about the fat. Like, I've heard about, and I've had a few people tell me anecdotally that the peppercorns do work, that it's worked for them when they've gotten too high, but why the fat?
Fat absorbs THC and it
Oh,
brings
so
you down,
just
and it just
okay,
relaxes you. Yeah, it just absorbs
right.
it. So.
Okay. Oh, that's
And you
that's
feel
good to know
happy if
too.
you eat ice cream. You're happy. Fried chicken makes you
Yeah.
happy, you know?
I mean, it's worth a shot if you're too high. You have some peppercorns and ice cream. Why
Yeah,
not?
but definitely hit the shower first and foremost, or get in a hot
Right.
bath and start sweating it out, because it's
Yeah.
only gonna take a few minutes, like 20 to 30 minutes to get past the most uncomfortable period, especially in the
Right.
hot water.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's very practical advice right there. Now, as far as dosing goes, I mean, this is something that people always want to talk about, is dosing, because if you're making edibles at home, it's really tricky sometimes to get accurate numbers, because a lot of the times you might be using homegrown cannabis, so you don't know how strong it is. What do you suggest that people do when it comes
Well, I
to
think that if you
dosing?
can't access a lab, because that's truly the only way that you're going to find out what milligrams per gram are, I'd say that what I've just seen collectively in my experience is that if somebody is growing their own cannabis and then they're processing it, they're coming out to around 600 milligrams, between 550 and 650 milligrams per gram of THC and cannabinoids. So just by kind of using that number, in your mind, you can sort of deduce what you're going to do. And then of course you don't be afraid of math. That's the way you
Yeah.
get correct dosing. If
Yeah.
you're going to if you have something that's 600 milligrams and you want it to be, 10 milligrams, then divide and then see how
Right.
many little cakes you need to make. And then you're going to know, because it's going to split because the math is correct. So you can't get to correct dosing without math.
Yeah, I know. I know a lot of people probably don't like hearing that, but it's kind of true.
Well, I don't know how, like, I'm an American and you're a Canadian. I don't know how, like, scared of math you were taught in school, but, like, math is something that I did not pay attention to in school. And I did everything. I have a PhD and I did everything I could to avoid math. And when I got to the point, and I mean, I've made multiple products I made lots of products that don't have cannabis that I've had to create from different herbs and stuff. But when I got down to the cannabis business and I had to be like correct on point milligrams per gram, I literally spent hours in my lab sobbing, beating the ground just because the math was so hard. So now nobody has to do that. Now they have Chat GPT. Plug your recipe into an AI and it's going to tell you. You don't need to be like me and break your glass bracelets and sob and feel like you need to kill yourself because you can't figure out what 10 milligrams is going to come from 7,000.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I have a calculator on my website. I show the math as well because there are some people
Awesome.
who
That's
have
great.
that
God
proclivity.
bless you.
I'm not that person necessarily. Like
I love
I
that.
can do it, but I like
Yeah.
to take the shortcuts too. So
Yeah,
I
don't
can
be afraid of
appreciate that.
math. Math is our
Yeah.
friend. It's a
Yeah.
universal language. It's what we all speak. So, don't tell yourself that you can't do math because you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. And honestly, the math of figuring out potency isn't that difficult because I wasn't super great at math in school, but I did have to do some calculus and stuff. And like, you know, that was way harder.
Yes,
Stats, forget
exactly.
that. Yeah, no
Mhm.
fun. But how would you approach dosing then for if you're making edibles for somebody else? Like, I don't want maybe in a medical context, somebody that would like to, take some edibles for pain relief or something like that. Would you change up your approach a little bit if you're making them for someone else versus yourself?
Well, I mean, like our products are you talking about like if I'm like at home and I want to make
Yeah.
something? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I would probably talk to the person that I'm working with and see where they fall on like how high do they want to be? What's really going on with them? I mean, there's a lot of nuances in cannabinoids. It's not just THC or CBD. Like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
CBG is super amazing for anti-inflammatory issues. CBC is incredible for, the cellular repair of our organs. That's not like that's a simple question, but that's not a simple answer.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So,
I realize that,
here's
which
what
is why I
I
love to
think
ask.
about all backyard alchemists and kitchen witches. Follow your heart and trust your intuition because you were led to those plants from those places, from your intuition and your heart and your desire. That is never going to lead you wrong. And you're going to find your right pathway and whoever you're helping by trial and error. So you're never going to end up in the lab or in your kitchen or in your backyard. And the first that, like maybe once you might in your whole entire life nail it the very first time you do it. But there has to be allowance for not having it right, not getting it correct.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Anytime I've made edibles for other people, I often, I make my calculations knowing that it could be off. And then I'll say, this is how much I think it is. And you should probably start with half of that or a
Yeah,
quarter,
that's
depending
perfect.
on your
Yeah.
experience, because that way they can test it out for themselves before just being like, yeah, okay. And then having a bad
Yeah.
time on my account because I just don't want that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, and if you're making something for somebody else, you're already going above and beyond. You're already, you're already out there helping. So if your
Yeah.
product sucks, you try. If
Yeah.
they get too high, they can eat less. Or
Yeah.
if they didn't get high enough, they can eat more. So
Yeah.
you're never wrong ever. And even
Right.
if you make the most heinous stuff, you could probably rub it on your skin, or you can just mix it back into another batch and try again.
I have done that before, both of those things. So yes, I concur that there's no sense in wasting good products just because something didn't turn out exactly the way you
Yeah,
hoped it would. So
yeah.
yeah. And I also love the backyard alchemists, kitchen witches too, of course, but I just love both of those phrases. So I'm probably going to be using those more.
Yeah,
Thank you for
please,
that,
please
Robin.
do,
But
please do, because I love the backyard alchemist. I mean, that was me. I mean, I've been making products in the backyard since I was literally 5 years old. And
right.
I have children, and my youngest daughter, when she was in fourth grade, was making like in the backyard, picking my herbs, putting things together, and then taking them to kids in her class. And I was like, girl, you can't do this. Like you were in fourth grade. You cannot be giving like, herbal remedies to other fourth graders. I'm going to go
Right.
to jail. And they
Yeah.
weren't even like cannabis products. She's
Yeah.
just using like rose hips and chamomile, but still. So if you are someone who likes that, you have always liked that. And you
Right.
have to trust that because you do
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
don't get bogged down with, I don't have any education. Plants are alive. They speak. Like I said, especially the cannabis plant, it's in the center of the wheel. It's a teacher plant. Its job is to teach us. And, teachers can sometimes kick your ass and leave you in the corner crying, especially if you've ever done martial arts. You will know that if you come up against your sensei or, your dojo master, you're going to get served up. Cannabis is no different. This is how she heals us. This is how she teaches us, by pushing the limits within us. So don't be afraid, and don't think you don't know, because you do know.
And I love that too, because I feel like I've had definitely that experience of the teacher plant with psilocybin before, but people don't often equate that with cannabis the same way for whatever reason. Maybe because when you get high, you don't get quite as out of it as you might with a higher dose of psilocybin, but it applies just as much. Like you said, like we can learn so much, and it's more approachable in a lot of ways because, it's you just can't get high on mushrooms all the time. At least I can't. So,
Oh, no, and nor do
yeah.
you want to, because that's
No.
the other thing. So there is something called the ladder of maturation, which is the journey of our spirit to our soul. Okay, and so plants like funguses, like mushrooms, and plants like cannabis and other, ayahuasca, things like this in this family, they're designed to kind of catapult us through the learning to ourself. But once you've gotten there, you have to integrate. So it's not a
Yes.
continuation of going back to the place of like, I need more information. You have to integrate everything you've already learned, or else it's pointless. And then the plants and the funguses will turn on you, because they'll be like, hey, buddy, you ain't paying attention to me. I'm either not going to work, or, you're going to just sit there in the corner and drool and forget where you put your keys for 12 hours.
Right. Yeah. And that doesn't sound like, a fun time, really.
No.
Yeah. Now, sorry, I just lost my spot there for a second, but you carry at Swan Apothecary FECO, and which are high potency extracts, which we already talked about earlier. What would you tell somebody who wanted to use them for making edibles? Because I know there's lots of people who prefer using a FECO than a regular
I think
infusion.
that's great. I think that is the best way to get the most out of the plant. If you can, even if you're working with a couple grams and, or, like an ounce or whatever, and you can just do that extraction with alcohol on your stovetop, you're going to get 5 or 6 grams of concentrate. That's going to make a whole lot more edibles that are going to last longer and be stronger than a butter extraction or an olive oil extraction.
Right. So is there anything that you think people should know before they get started with using like a high potency extract like that?
Clean your space and wear gloves.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
like gloves are really important, and wear a mask. Everybody's like, oh, like when we work with our mushroom products, when we're doing mushrooms, the people, like my staff, my production crew, they are in hazmat suits, and people think it's funny, but mushroom dust flies. And
Mhm.
if you're just there to work, if you're just there to create, you really want to be like present and not like getting high and getting lost. And so, clean up your kitchen, wear gloves, wear a mask, pay attention, practice good handling technique, because who knows, that little product that you're making in your kitchen right now might be something that you're going to be making for tens of thousands of people. Like you might be one of those people like me who's going to go from their bedroom floor to the boardroom. And
Right.
with the practices you start now are the practices that you're going to keep as you grow in your business or in your home.
Okay. I like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
designated tools for making your medicine, like different,
Right.
not pots that you're going to cook pasta in. Like you need to invest, go to the Goodwill if you don't have any money and spend some money, get your stuff that lives in a container that's just for your medicine making. Make sure you wash it before you start. You wash it after you start. Like our lab is on an alchemical grid. My whole building is with crystals and copper wiring. And, there's only certain musics that are allowed to be being played when we're, formulating medicine. And this is all to create the vibrational pattern within the product. So you can really amplify that when you're in your home.
Interesting. So is there any music that you would recommend? Is it like a certain hertz that people like the music is played at, or?
Well, I could tell you what I won't allow to play. I don't
Okay.
really, I mean, like the Hertz thing is very important and actually music is incredibly healing, but I'm not a musicologist, so I can't really tell you what Hertz to be in. So like for me, there's no rock, there's no rap, there's no violence. When we're working with mushrooms, we do a lot of playing like Punjabi music because it's very high lifting and it makes you want to dance and it makes you want to move. When I'm
Yeah.
making medicine for people who are dealing with cancer, we're going more into like the lo-fi system because we want people to be able to, when they ingest, relax, because that's how we heal. Our nervous system, our immunity only repairs when we are at rest. It doesn't repair when we're in a hyper state. Like some people be like, are you making that with sativa? They're all scared that they're going to get like all wired up with the sativa. But when you're compounding cannabinoids, and like when we make our FECO oil, we're using an entire, there's 25 different strains usually, and they're coming from 3 different grow areas. So I'm getting a cannabinoid profile. It ceases to be sativa or indica. So if you're making your own medicine, mix up your strains. That way you're going to get the most powerful example of the cannabinoids that you can. Use a really intense sativa and a really intense indica. Combine them.
I love that. Yeah. And also just the whole thinking about your environment when you're making your edibles, which is something that
Yes,
yeah,
really
like,
important. I mean, like, yeah,
yeah,
be mindful. The more mindful we are, the more we're able to heal and
yeah,
achieve what we want.
yeah. Now, Swan Apothecary, you have products that you've formulated for specific goals, like, anxiety and sleep and all kinds of things. If a home cook is trying to build towards similar outcomes, like they have a specific outcome that they're looking for, like maybe they want something for daytime use or whatever, do you have like a framework for thinking about ratios or
Yeah,
timing?
yeah, for sure. Well, it's not so much. Okay, so if you want to make something for sleep, then consider terpenes. Like anybody can buy
Right.
terpenes; they're available in the secular market. So terpenes are what make things go up and down. So when you go into the dispensary and you're buying like a sativa gummy, it's more than likely not made with the sativa, and it's more than likely made with a ton of different plants. So it's whatever. But the terpene profile that they've added to that mix is in the sativa family. It's uplifting. So
Right.
terpenes are super important. And then also other plants, add plants like valerian root, or for sleeping specifically, or skullcap, mix them in with your cannabis. I'm not a big fan of adding essential oils, especially after they're done. Even food grade essential oils, because the essential oil itself has gone through an extraction process and all you're really getting is the scent of that. You're not
Right.
really getting, if you want to, like flower essences don't smell as strong as essential oils. However, they have a higher vibrational pattern and more of the plant present than an essential oil.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask about essential oils just because some people have them in their house. I have a bunch. But then as far as extracting for specific outcomes, you mentioned like valerian. Would I consider extracting cannabis with the valerian together?
Yes. Yeah. Mix them
Interesting.
together. Yeah. Put them
Okay.
together.
And could
hmm
this just be like a dried valerian that I've picked up
Yeah,
at my local
absolutely.
shop?
Yeah, go to your local herb
Right.
store, get skullcap, get valerian root, get chamomile, get whatever you're
Yeah.
looking for. You don't need a lot, you
Yeah.
know, like to
Yeah.
1 ounce of cannabis. Let's say to 1 ounce of cannabis, you're going to use a quarter ounce of the herb that you want to, and that's a good rule that anyone can use. All of y'all out there, it's a 1/4 to a quarter to a one.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because like you can pick up all kinds of things at the store and then maybe even what other ways do you use it besides I mean sleep obviously, but is there any plant companion plants that you've infused with that you find produce a really interesting result, whether it's just flavor or taste
Well,
or
I love
outcome?
citruses. I love citruses, and they're very uplifting, and they're great for moods. And you can use all of your, the orange peel, the lemon peel, the lime peel, all of that. I
Right.
love to throw those in when I'm like we have a product that has a citrus background. I think it's the Pain Away, and when that's created excuse me, I'm just basically throwing lemon peels into the infusion the oil that we're infusing into. So we use a hemp seed oil. So I throw my botanicals into the hemp seed oil and I infuse that. And then we add the isolates and the concentrates. So that carrier oil is already infused.
Right. Okay. And there's no issue with using like the fresh peel because you're straining it out anyway.
Yeah.
Like as far as bringing in like water content or
Back to
something like that.
strain.
Yeah. Okay. It's funny because I find like a lot of home extractors don't really think about all the other things they could be
They
extracting
don't know
along with
because
their
when you're a
cannabis.
home extractor, you're getting your information on YouTube or whatever. And most
Right.
people who are doing it are not people like me who have an educational background and a business background in it. So these are nuances that you don't know what you don't know, and nobody's dumb. And until you know, you don't know. So this is why these kind of podcasts like your show is so important, because you're helping. And I mean, I love the teach a person to fish as opposed to sell them a fish. I mean, I love that. I love a person who makes their own medicine, and I will go like as far out of my way as I can to help people create their own products. Because the intention, your intuition, the love that you put into it, even if you make something garbage, it's still fabulous. It's still amazing. It's made with you. So you can never get it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that because I have done a lot of extractions like infused olive oil with fresh herbs so I can maintain the flavor of those herbs throughout the winter when it's cold and nasty where I am. And I mean, you could do the same with cannabis as well.
You can take that infused olive oil and then you can make your cannabis product with it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now, I love that you also mentioned, like you touched on it a second ago, but your guiding principle is love all, serve all, and you're vocal about social equity in cannabis. For home edibles makers who are doing this in legal places, legal jurisdictions, but others are not, how do you think about the responsibility that comes with being a part of this community?
Well, let me just be very clear when I say, fuck the law.
I love it.
Yeah. I can't say anything more than that. Fuck the law straight up. These are plants. They grow in the ground. They're not regulated. So, seriously, if you watch the news, if someone's going to come for you because you're infusing cannabis, then they got way too much time on their hands. But of course, now in that, we work with a lot of people who have kids who are trying to treat their kids, and it's a different situation, especially if your child is sick and you're in a place where it's not legal and you're giving your kid cannabis. The state in America, the state can come in and take your child from you. So there, of course, is you have to know the law, okay? Because like Bob Dylan said, if you want to be an outlaw, you got to know the law. So you can't break a law if you don't know the law. So understand what the perimeter and the paradigm of where you live is, and then bob and weave. Maybe don't be standing on the corner across the street from an elementary school trying to sell your wares.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Can you talk a bit more about the love all, serve all principle that you have? Like I'd say where you came up with it, but obviously that's through your work.
So love all, serve all is actually from Sai Baba, who is a Indian deity. And it came to me via Isaac Tegard, and he is the guy that started the Hard Rock Cafe. And if you've never been to a Hard Rock, love all, serve all is on everything. It's all over the place on the matches and everything. And the reason why Isaac did that was he was in India and he was walking down, like he was like super high or whatever. He was walking through some pathway and he saw like a little restaurant that said love all, serve all, and they were just feeding people for free. They were just feeding, the poor people for free. And that really touched him in that moment. And he thought, I'm going to build my business on this principle. So Isaac was one of my clients very, very long ago. And when he told me that story, I decided I'm going to love all, serve all too, because what that really means is to love all means I love you where you're at. And I'll serve you what you need. Okay. So like, let's look to the goddess Kali in this. She has 8 arms and she's wearing a necklace of heads. You see her and you're like, oh, she's so scary, right? But sometimes the way that we give life is by cutting off the head. We have to cut the head of the snake of something that's really terrible in our life. That is a loving action to stand and protect yourself and take out something that's coming from you. So it doesn't mean like, oh, I love you, I'll do whatever you want. It means I'm going to meet you where you're at and I'm going to serve you what you need. So that is the principle of my business. We don't turn people away, but we also just don't give them, like, we're not just here to pet their head and be like, no accountability or responsibility for you. We'll do it for you.
Right. Yeah. And the meet you where you're at is a very important distinction as well, because you're not requiring people to show up a certain way. And I think
No.
that's an important distinction there too.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I've had people call, I mean, like, and also don't take anybody personally, because like people are going to like you, love you, hate you, dislike you, or not care anything about you. And that goes for your products as well. Like, you're going to get all 5 of those human responses. Even Jesus only got those 5 responses, you know,
Right.
like some people loved him. They called him the son of God. Some people hated him. They stuck him on a cross and killed him. Some people were
Right.
too busy like farming their sheep. They just didn't care. So it's
Yeah.
the thing. So if you are in your integrity and you are moving from that place of integrity, you are always going to do good work. And how it's received by others is going to be how they perceive it and where they're at in their life.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
part of the principle of love all, serve all, is that I'm going to serve you and give you love, but I'm not your doormat. I'm not here to
Yep.
be responsible for your actions. I'm here to reflect you where you're at
I love
and to
it.
serve you in a way that's going to bring you to your highest point, your highest self, which sometimes
Right.
might be pulling the rug out from underneath your ass, you know?
Oh, 100%. I've certainly had that happen to myself. So,
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
cal growth, but
exactly.
it's not
Thank you.
it's not always
It's
fun. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Usually not fun, but super important and reflective. When you look back on it after a couple of years, you realize that without that moment, you would not be the awesome source that you are now.
Yeah. Now, Robin, just a couple more questions today because I want to be mindful of our time, and I feel like I could talk to you forever, but what would surprise people about you?
Let me see. What would surprise me? I'm actually an introvert, you know, so I'm very external, but I'm a huge gardener. I actually like turn my phone off at 5 o'clock and on the weekend don't talk to anybody. I just hang out with my plants and animals. So I think that's it.
Yeah,
That's probably,
I like that because I consider myself a bit of an ambivert myself.
yeah.
I can be quite external, but I certainly love the alone time as well. And finally, where can people find you? Like, where can they find Swan Apothecary and the work that you're putting out in the world?
Well, I appreciate that you said Swan Apothecary about 200 times during this
Yeah,
interview. So thank you so much. And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
exactly where people can find us, is at swanapothecary.com. They can also Google my name, Robin Swan. I'm all over the place. We're on Facebook, Instagram, we're all the things.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
all over, and we ship to Canada and we ship to
Oh,
the
great.
UK. So, we're available, and they can do consultations with me as well if they want. And all of that is available just via my name, robinswan.com or swanapothecary.com. We're always here. We always have time for you. I always tell people that repetition is the second law of learning. So I'm never going to get mad at you for asking me the same question 200 times. Like, I might screenshot what I already said just because you might
Right,
need to see it again, but never from a place of, oh my God, are you asking me again? And if
right.
you're working, just for everybody out there who's navigating the cesspool of the cannabis industry, who's maybe not make your own stuff as much as you can. And if you cannot make your own stuff and you're like seeking for others, don't do business with people who inbox you, okay, and tell you that they've got the best products ever, okay? Don't do business with people who don't have phone numbers, emails, and you cannot talk to them on the phone. Be mindful of your money, because what I have seen is that people love their people, and they will go to the end of the earth. They will buy magic beans. They will give everything to keep their loved one alive. And unfortunately, that puts them in a very vulnerable position. So be protective of your beautiful self and your loved ones. Do your due diligence and make sure that nobody is just trying to take your money.
Honestly, that totally checks out because when I worked at the dispensary, I had a lot of older customers that would come in and they would sometimes be like, I want to buy this thing that I have, and they would show me a little vial, and it was usually so many times it would be hemp oil, like the kind that you would buy at the grocery store,
Gas station,
being
right?
sold as like some kind of CBD elixir,
Right.
that would solve all their ailments and stuff. And it was some of the prices they were paying were outrageous as well. For something you go to the store and spend $10 for a bottle that
Yeah.
was 100 times the size. So that's a really great reminder. And I would suggest that everybody check out Swan Apothecary, because I have been to your website and it looks fantastic. And
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. It's been so
yeah,
great talking to you. I really
yeah,
appreciate that you gave me this time, and any
yeah.
way that we can support you, we are happy to do that. We'll of course like share your great word. But yeah, we all got to get out there and just spread the gospel of cannabis, because she is our savior basically, and she has been with us for always. Food, shelter, clothing, medicine, fuel. That's our, we are here. That plant is here for us and has always been.
Yes, that's a great way to end it. Thank you so much for your time today, Robin, and we'll talk
Yeah,
soon.
thank you.